Hello friends, this is Grief speaking. Today we're continuing our journey down the horror movie villain Iceberg. The first couple of tiers were fun, but I'm excited to get into tier 3 because we make the shift into slightly more obscure villains here, and I guess I'm not as big of a horror fan as I thought because there are a lot of entries I didn't know much about, and we still have 4 tiers to go. There's also just some really disturbing and crazy stuff in this tier, so it's going to be a good one. I do want to give a bit of a warning up top. This video does contain spoilers for several movies. There's movies where the killer's identity isn't revealed till the end, or where a sinister plot comes to light, and it's impossible to cover some of these villains without talking about some big twists. I did, however, timestamp the whole video, so if you hear a movie come up that you don't want spoiled, feel free to just skip to the next entry. Also, on some of the movies with big twists or reveals, I give a little warning beforehand, especially if they're recent. If you want to support my work, consider becoming a patron, where you'll get a shout out at the end of every video as well as bonus content, but that's enough blabbering out of me. This is the horror villain Iceberg, tier 3. Alright, so let's get right into tier 3, starting with the Strangers. The Strangers consist of the 3 masked figures, Pinup Girl, Dollface, and Man in Mask. In the Strangers, the group begins stalking, harassing, and ultimately killing a young couple in their summer home. Their method is fairly unusual as they knock on doors, and when someone answers, they pick them as their next victim. They first mess with the couple by moving stuff around in the house and stalking them in order to scare them. Eventually, they tie them up, and when asked why, Dollface gives one of the most chilling answers in horror.
Because you were home.
There's no obvious motive, which is why people consider this such a scary movie. Whoever these 3 people are, they get some kind of thrill by doing this, and the movie keeps their identity anonymous. Tiffany Valentine, the bride of Chucky. Tiffany is Chucky's longtime on-again, off-again girlfriend and eventual wife. After Chucky was completely torn to bits at the end of Child's Play 3, Tiffany got his remains from an evidence locker and stitched him back together. She then uses a voodoo ritual to bring his soul back to the doll. However, they get into an argument shortly after, and she locks him in a baby pen with a bride doll. Enraged, Chucky escapes the pen and kills her before using voodoo to transfer her soul to the doll. Now they have to work together to try and find human bodies. During this journey, Tiffany and Chucky rekindle the relationship, and Chucky proposes. They also have weird doll sex. And at the end of Bride of Chucky, Tiffany gives birth to an evil doll baby before dying. Of course, she's resurrected again later and must now take on the role of a mother. Tiffany is typically less angry and violent than Chucky, and she's a romantic, which makes her much more sympathetic and sweet. Despite this, she has no problem with murder and will kill whoever's in her way to get what she wants. Damien Thorn, the Omen. Damien Thorn is the son of Satan and the Antichrist. He's most well known from the original Omen film, where he's only a boy and the adopted son of Robert and Kathy Thorn. However, this is unknown to everyone except Robert. After their real son died during childbirth, Robert is persuaded to adopt Damien, but passes him off as their actual son to his wife. As a boy, Damien has some off-putting characteristics, such as enjoying the suffering of other people, animals being afraid of him, and his fear of entering a church. Damien first kills off the family nanny by supernatural means. Later, he pushes his pregnant mother over a railing, causing her to miscarry, and finally he kills a priest by causing a lightning rod to impale him. As he enters his teen years, he becomes more aware of the fact that he is the Antichrist and accepts his calling. At this point, he has several known abilities. He can cause machinery to break down, cause people to see horrific visions and develop aneurysms, and knows vast information about virtually every known historical event. He's also immune to all major and minor mortal ailments. Eventually, he becomes a powerful politician and the leader of a satanic cult preparing for the coming of the Messiah. There's only one way to kill him, which is to lay him on a church altar and stab him with the 7 Megiddo daggers, ancient blades designed to kill Satan's progeny. Buffalo Bill, Silence of the Lambs. Buffalo Bill is the central antagonist in Silence of the Lambs. While Hannibal is definitely the villain associated with the film, Buffalo Bill is the actual serial killer that FBI agent Clarice Starling is trying to find. His real name is James Gum, a disturbed killer who kidnaps and murders women. His MO involves abducting overweight women, starving them to loosen their skin, and ultimately killing them to create a woman suit from their skin. Obviously, this started with a troubled childhood, as he was placed in foster care at the age of 2. At 10 years old, he was adopted by his grandparents. However, he ends up killing them at the age of 12. He was then placed in an institution until adulthood, but of course the trouble didn't stop there. When his boyfriend leaves him for another man, Gum kills the new lover and skins him. From here, he begins his new journey of creating a beautiful beautiful skin suit, killing several women in the process. His typical tactic is to approach a woman pretending to be injured and then knocking them out. He then places them in a well he keeps in his basement and starves them until their skin is loose enough to easily remove. One disturbing aspect of the character is how he addresses his victims as it, treating them as things rather than people. He also forces them to lotion their skin in order to keep it soft, which is where Buffalo Bill's most famous quote comes from.
It rubs the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
Margaret White, Carrie. Margaret White is the mother of Carrie and is the true villain of the film. She's a religious fanatic that subjects Carrie to an extremely strict upbringing, making her adhere to bizarre practices like locking her in a weird prayer closet where she must atone for her sins. Some of Margaret's abuse may be due to a sort of resentment over the fact that Carrie's father forced himself on Margaret, leading to Carrie's conception. When Margaret discovers Carrie's telekinetic abilities, she completely loses it and decides Carrie must be a witch and therefore must be killed. When Carrie arrives home from the prom massacre, her mother attacks her, but Carrie kills her using her new abilities. Angela Baker, Sleepaway Camp. Angela Baker is the main character we follow in Sleepaway Camp. She's a shy young girl who lives with her weirdo aunt after her father and brother Peter died in a boat accident. Angela and her cousin Ricky head off to Camp Arawak for the summer, where Angela has a tough time fitting in as she's very shy. Some of the other campers bully her, but she does develop a love interest with another camper, Paul. Suddenly, mysterious deaths begin popping up all around the camp, all seemingly associated with Angela. This all culminates in one of the biggest twists in the slasher genre, and one of maybe the freakiest moments in 80s horror. It turns out that Angela is behind all the murders, and even crazier than that, Angela's true identity is that of Peter Baker. Remember at the beginning of the movie when Angela's father and brother died? Well, that wasn't Angela's brother, that was Angela. Peter actually survived. However, the weirdo aunt decided she wanted a girl since she already had a boy, and from then on treated Peter as if he was Angela. In the final haunting shot of the movie, Angela, or Peter, growls like a wild animal, fully nude with male genitals exposed. Terrifying. Gill-Man, creature from the Black Lagoon. The Gill-Man is another classic Universal monster villain, originally appearing in Creature from the Black Lagoon, and is probably the least known of the monsters. The Gill-Man is the last surviving member of a race of amphibious humanoids. Marine biologists find some remains of this race and decide to start an expedition in search of more. In a similar fashion to King Kong, the Gill-Man, while violent and defensive, seems to have a fondness for one of the female members. In the sequel, Revenge of the Creature, the Gill-Man is captured and put in an aquarium. However, he escapes and kidnaps once again one of the female researchers. And in the third movie, The Creature Walks Among Us, he develops a land mammal's lung structure and is surgically modified to walk on land. Ginger Fitzgerald. Ginger Snaps. Ginger is one of the central characters in Ginger Snaps along with her sister Bridget. The two are social outcasts who have a fascination with death. After Ginger has her first period, the two encounter a werewolf, which infects Ginger after attacking her. From here, Ginger begins undergoing the transformation both physically and in personality. She becomes more violent, aggressive, and sexually active, which is one of the ways to spread the virus. She also begins physically morphing, growing wolf-like ears, excessive body hair, and even a tail. Eventually, Ginger fully transforms and her sister Bridget is forced to kill her. In the sequel, Ginger returns as a spirit watching over her sister. Kayako Saeki, the Grudge. Kayako was a quiet and introverted housewife living in Tokyo, harboring an unrequited love for a college professor. Her life took a tragic turn when her husband discovered her diary, which detailed her feelings for the professor, and in a fit of rage, he brutally murders Kayako, their young son Toshio, and the family cat. This terrible act created a powerful curse that attached to the house, causing anyone who entered to be haunted and eventually killed by the vengeful spirits. Kayako is instantly recognizable within the J-horror space with her pale skin, long black hair, contorted body, and of course the strange croaking sound she makes. Her terrifying presence, I think, is captured perfectly in the classic staircase scene. David, the Lost Boys. David is the charismatic and menacing leader of a gang of teenage vampires in The Lost Boys. He has the typical vampire abilities including flight, enhanced strength, immortality, and supernatural levels of persuasion. He uses these skills to slowly convince Michael, the protagonist of the movie, to join his gang, eventually turning him into a vampire. It's unclear how old David really is, as his past is kept pretty secret. Santanico Pandemonium, from Dusk Till Dawn. Santanico is the seductive vampire queen of the Titty Twister, a vampire-filled bar in Mexico. Originally, she was a young woman named Esmeralda in the year 1913, but is turned into a vampire by her mother. For decades after this, she runs the Titty Twister and feeds on patrons who wander in, until the Gecko brothers and Fuller family show up and begin killing the vampires inside, including the vampire queen herself, Christine. Christine is a 1958 Plymouth Fury. Yeah, this is maybe one of the most unusual villains on here. Christine kills anyone who messes with her new owner, Arnie. The car seems to have some kind of power over Arnie that leads him to become obsessed with it. He dumps his girlfriend and even abandons his parents. It's unclear exactly what Christine is, but we do know the previous owner also became obsessed with the car. The owner's daughter was choked to death inside the car, and shortly after, both the owner and his wife died inside as well. So it may be that the car is possessed by the spirits of the dead, but Christine does seem to have a personality of its own. Dr. Josef Heiter, the human centipede. Dr. Heiter is probably the most disturbing villain so far. Heiter was originally a renowned German surgeon. In fact, he was the leading surgeon in separating conjoined twins. However, he became bored of separating and instead wanted to create. He became obsessed with the idea of joining two bodies together to function as one. At first, he did this with 3 dogs, but they died shortly after surgery. Next, he kidnaps 3 tourists, American friends Lindsay and Jenny, and a Japanese man named Katsuro. He performs a grotesque surgery on the 3, attaching their mouths and anuses, forming what he calls a Siamese triplet, or his nickname for it, the human centipede. One of the most disturbing aspects of Heiter is how he treats the 3 captives as a single entity and calls it his pet. Besides the fact that he will go to any lengths to succeed in his creation, he is unnecessarily cruel. When Lindsay attempts to escape, Heiter puts her in the middle of the centipede as punishment, explaining that it is the most painful section. Josef Heiter was based on the real-life villain and Nazi Josef Mengele, who is sometimes called the Angel of Death for the horrific and disturbing human experiments he performed on prisoners of Auschwitz. Sweeney Todd. Sweeney Todd was originally Benjamin Barker, a barber and family man living a charming life with his beautiful wife Lucy and baby daughter Joanna. Unfortunately, a corrupt judge, Tarpon, wanted Barker's wife for himself and had Barker sent away in order to take his wife. Well, Lucy tried to poison herself and went insane, and so the judge took Joanna as his own daughter. 15 years later, Benjamin returns to London as Sweeney Todd, seeking revenge. He rents a room from Miss Lovett, a landlady, and opens a barber shop. While waiting for a chance to kill Judge Tarpon and get his revenge, he begins slaughtering his patrons, slitting their throats with the straight razor. In the meantime, Miss Lovett begins using the corpses to create meat pies that actually become a huge hit in the town. The Tall Man, Phantasm. The Tall Man is a supernatural undertaker from another dimension who reanimates the dead into dwarf-like minions to serve him. He controls an arsenal of deadly flying silver spheres that drill into and kill his victims. The Tall Man was once a mortal human mortician named Jebediah Morningside. After becoming fascinated with the connection between the world of the living and the world of the dead, he began experimenting in interdimensional travel, seeking to become immortal. He did manage to create a machine that could travel between worlds, but after stepping through the gate, Jebediah was no more, and only the Tall Man remained. It's unclear what happened to Jebediah exactly, but the theories range from a higher intelligence possessing him or taking on his likeness to him radically changing due to what he experienced in the worlds beyond. He is essentially trying to become the Lord of the Dead as he invades towns, wiping out the population and turning the dead into his slaves. The Armitage Family. Get Out. Just a spoiler warning here, as this is one of those movies with a big twist. The Armitage family is a seemingly normal and inviting family, however they are actually part of a secret cult. They kidnap young black people, and using a bizarre surgical procedure, the family transfers the consciousness of old white people into their bodies, which they then control. The original person is still inside the body, but can no longer control it, being forced to stay trapped in what is called the sunken place. Blair Witch. The Blair Witch is the central unseen antagonist in the Blair Witch Project and its sequels. The entity is said to haunt the Black Hills Forest near Burkittsville, Maryland. According to local legends, the Blair Witch is the vengeful spirit of Ellie Kedward, a woman accused of witchcraft and executed in the 18th century. Her curse on the town and its inhabitants manifests through mysterious and malevolent occurrences within the forest. The Blair Witch torments and psychologically manipulates those who enter her domain, leading them to become disoriented and paranoid. Her appearance is ambiguous, as her victims have seen her take various forms, but most seem to be something like an old hag, sometimes floating and sometimes not. The best look we've ever gotten of the witch is in the 2016 film, where she appears to be a large malformed creature resembling an old woman with witch-like features. However, even the director said that this apparition, along with the others in the series, are simply victims of the witch, possessed and used as puppets. Art the Clown, Terrifier. Art the Clown is the main antagonist of the Terrifier series, but has been featured in other previous works, namely All Hallows Eve. He's one of the most mysterious on this tier, with no clear background or motives other than wreaking havoc and brutally murdering people. In Terrifier, he seems pretty much human. However, spoilers here, Art dies at the end of Terrifier, and in Terrifier 2, he is brought back by a mysterious entity known as the Pale Girl. From here, Art is able to withstand inhuman levels of damage, and although it appears Art is killed again at the end of Terrifier 2, the Pale Girl takes his head, and a disturbing after-credit scene implies he lives again. So there's a ton of mystery surrounding Art the Clown, and once you throw the Pale Girl entity into the mix, fans have had a field day coming up with theories. Pod People, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The Pod People are existential beings that replicate humans by growing in large seed pods, producing identical but emotionless duplicates that replace the originals while they sleep. The Pod People operate as a hive mind and work collectively to slowly take over. The origins of these aliens are unknown, but Earth is likely not the first planet they've invaded, as the seed pods drift through space and begin propagating their species wherever they land. The Thing. The Thing is a parasitic extraterrestrial life form that crash landed in Antarctica. It has no fixed appearance, as it can perfectly mimic any living organism it assimilates, revealing grotesque, monstrous forms when exposed. This creature is a highly intelligent life form, using the memories and knowledge of its victims to blend in and manipulate situations. Its primary traits include shapeshifting and cellular mimicry. However, it is vulnerable to fire and intense heat. One notable detection method is a blood test, as separated parts of the alien will try to survive independently. Its origins are unknown, but it's clear that the alien race it belongs to is fairly advanced, as it came to Earth by advanced means of space travel. One interesting detail in the 2011 prequel is that the Thing cannot replicate inorganic material, meaning that anyone with metal implants, piercings, or dental fillings cannot be perfectly replicated. Rose the Hat, Dr. Sleep. Rose the Hat is leader of the True Knot, a cult-like group of psychic vampires. These entities feed on steam, a life force emitted by individuals with the Shining when they experience pain and fear. She's identifiable by her distinctive top hat and possesses powerful telepathic abilities, which she uses to track and manipulate her victims. Rose and the True Knot seek out children who shine, torturing and killing them to extract their steam. Her primary target becomes Abra Stone, a young girl with exceptionally potent abilities. Rose's pursuit of Abra brings her into conflict with Dan Torrance, the son of Jack Torrance in The Shining, who is now an adult. The Tethered, Us. This one has some heavy spoilers, so fair warning. The Tethered are part of a government experiment aimed at controlling the population by creating clones of every individual. However, the experiment was abandoned, and the Tethered were left to live in squalor, mimicking the actions of their counterparts above ground in a grotesque and distorted manner. They possess all the abilities of their counterparts, plus they seem to have enhanced strength, as well as the ability to anticipate their doppelgangers' movements from mirroring them for so long. However, they have no ability to speak and basically have no souls, for lack of a better term. The Tethered begin a rebellion against their surface counterparts, led by Red, the doppelganger of Adelaide Wilson, the protagonist of the film. The main group of Tethered we see are the counterparts of the Wilson family, as they attempt along with the other clones to take the place of those on the surface. Pumpkinhead. Pumpkinhead is a demonic entity summoned for revenge. In the events of the movie, a man named Ed Harley summons Pumpkinhead to avenge the death of his son, who is killed by reckless teenagers on dirt bikes. Ed takes his son's body to a witch, who then summons Pumpkinhead, warning that it will come at a cost. The demon, Pumpkinhead, is a tall, thin creature with no fur and pale skin. He has a large bulbous head that has a reddish hue, presumably the trait that's given him his nickname. Pumpkinhead has superhuman strength and is virtually immortal, stopping at nothing until all those he's been called to kill are dead. Whoever summons the demon becomes connected to it, feeling the pain of the people it kills, and even sees through the eyes of Pumpkinhead while it kills. This link between the demon and its summoner is actually part of Pumpkinhead's only weakness, as the only way to stop the demon before he finishes the revenge mission is to kill the summoner. Rhoda Penmark, the Bad Seed. Rhoda Penmark is one of the original killer kids, predating the Omen by 20 years. Unlike Damien, Rhoda isn't demonic, but just a straightforward psychopath. Rhoda murders her classmate Cloud when he wins a penmanship medal Rhoda believes she deserved, and then kills a handyman who mentions her association with Cloud's death. Because of Rhoda's charming exterior, no one suspects her of her crimes except for Christine, Rhoda's mother. It turns out that Christine's mother, Rhoda's grandmother, was also a psychopathic killer, and it seems that this trait skipped a generation. Krug Stillo, The Last House on the Left. Krug Stillo is the ruthless and unforgiving gang leader in The Last House on the Left. After his heroin-addicted son Junior lures two high school girls back to an apartment, they're taken out to the woods where Krug and his gang humiliate, torture, and kill them. Krug is the embodiment of brutality with no remorse for his actions. At one point, he even carves his name into the chest of one of the girls, and later in the film, he tries to convince his own son to kill himself. Luckily, this is a revenge film. When Krug takes refuge in one of the girls' parents' house, unbeknownst to them, the parents find out what happened and hatch a plan to get revenge on the gang, killing them off one by one. The Creeper. Jeepers Creepers. The Creeper is a mysterious and almost immortal creature that emerges from hibernation every 23 years to feed on humans for 23 days straight. While mostly humanoid, the Creeper has leathery and grayish green skin, sharp teeth, and an alien-like hood that is normally lying flat against his head but sometimes expands into a wide fringe of webbed insect-like appendages. The Creeper has superhuman strength and agility, an enhanced sense of smell used to stalk his prey, large bat-like wings giving him the ability to fly, and most predominantly the ability to regenerate. He can regenerate lost and damaged body parts by eating the corresponding parts of his victims. While the origin of the Creeper is unknown, we do know that he has been around for centuries at least. In the Jeepers Creepers comic series, Trail of the Beast, he orchestrated a human sacrifice ritual during the time of the Aztecs and later devoured European settlers, even being responsible for the disappearance of the Roanoke colony. While he is beast-like, he does have some human qualities. He's seen whistling in the first and third movie and is even a bit of an artist. Although his art does involve collecting and stitching together human bodies in an underground lair called the House of Pain. The Leprechaun. Maybe one of my favorite horror villains, the Leprechaun is a horrific twist on the classic folklore creature. Well, actually, according to the film, the folklore was based off of this leprechaun. He's an immortal creature that's lived for centuries and is obsessed with gold. If anyone takes even a piece of his gold, he'll stop at nothing to retrieve it, killing anyone in his way. The leprechaun's dressed in typical green garb and has red hair, although he lacks the childlike look of traditional leprechauns, instead having wrinkled gray skin and black lips. Originally, he was rooted in Ireland, but after Dan O'Grady took his gold and fled to America, the leprechaun followed, and all the films take place in the States after this. The leprechaun's abilities include all sorts of trickery, including telekinesis, mind control, casting illusions, teleportation, and enhanced speed and strength. What really makes the leprechaun stand out as a villain is his humor and personality. Much like Freddy, he finds creative and amusing ways to kill his victims, and we have to give major props to actor Warwick Davis for bringing the character to life. While the first Leprechaun movie set the tone as a somewhat serious slasher film with some comedic elements, the sequels basically go full comedy with outrageous kills and a non-stop stream of rhyming one-liners from the Leprechaun, including the Leprechaun in the Hood movies where he even raps. He also went to space in Leprechaun 4, which is the most bizarre film of them all, being a straight-up sci-fi fantasy movie with the murderous leprechaun thrown into the mix. This one takes place in the future and the leprechaun is on an alien planet. Although the most recent film, The Leprechaun Returns, actually retcons all the sequels and takes place immediately after the first movie. Bagul, Sinister. Bagul, also known as Mr. Boogie, is an ancient pagan deity who consumes the souls of children, drawing them into his dark realm. He's a tall, eerie figure with a pale face and dark, hollow eyes, often seen in grainy, unsettling home movies. Bagul's method involves influencing and corrupting children through these films, convincing them to murder their families and record the acts. Once the children have carried this out, Bagul captures their souls, condemning them to an eternity in his nightmarish domain. Belial Bradley, Basket Case. Belial and his brother Dwayne were conjoined twins who were surgically separated. While Dwayne looks like an average young man, his brother Belial is completely deformed, essentially being only a disfigured head with arms. Because of this, Dwayne is forced to carry him around in a giant basket. He lacks the ability to speak, but can telepathically communicate with his brother, and the two can sense each other's emotions. The brothers' main goal is to get revenge on the surgeon that separated them. This is mostly led by Belial. While Dwayne comes off actually pretty timid and kind, Belial is a bloodthirsty brute hell-bent on revenge, and he's getting pretty fed up being hidden and stuck in a basket all day. When Dwayne falls in love, Belial freaks the hell out and goes on a rampage, eventually pitting brother against brother. While the first film is pretty dark, the sequels take a more comical approach. Belial actually meets a girl with a similar deformity, and they even have kids, which just look like little baby versions of Belial. The Phantom of the Opera. The Phantom is a mysterious, disfigured musical genius who lives in the labyrinth tunnels beneath the opera house. He falls in love with Christine, a beautiful young soprano. Using his influence and threats, he helps Christine rise to stardom, but his love turns to obsession attraction as he demands her love in return. There's been many iterations of this character, but I always preferred the 1925 version played by Lon Chaney because it feels the most like a horror, mostly due to Chaney's groundbreaking makeup which he applied himself. Mama. Mama, originally known as Edith Brennan, was a patient in a mental institution in the 19th century. After escaping the institution, Edith took her infant daughter and fled, but was pursued by authorities. In a desperate attempt to escape, Edith jumped off a cliff into a lake, clutching her baby. While Edith died from the fall, her child was caught on a branch and didn't follow her into the water. Edith's spirit, unable to move on due to her anguish and longing for her child, became a vengeful ghost, wandering the forest in search of her lost baby. In the present, two young girls, Victoria and Lily, are found 5 years after their disappearance in this forest. While lost in the woods, Mama watched over them. Now that they've been found, they stay with their uncle and his girlfriend, although Mama has grown attached to them and begins stalking the family. Mama is a tall and gaunt figure with a messed up face, and her movements are jerky and unnatural, which is partly what makes her so creepy. She has some typical ghost abilities as well, like levitation and the ability to phase through walls. The Firefly Family, House of a Thousand Corpses. The Firefly family are the central antagonists in House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and most recently, Three from Hell. In House of a Thousand Corpses, they're a family of psychotic serial killers. Most notably are Captain Spaulding, Otis, and Baby. Captain Spaulding is a dirty-mouthed clown and patriarch of the family who runs a gas station / roadside haunted house. Otis is the most disturbed of the family, killing people and mutilating their bodies, turning them into freak shows for Captain Spaulding's attraction, as well as wearing their faces as masks. Baby is the only other female in the family besides Mother Firefly, and is just as sadistic, luring victims back to her house while posing as a hitchhiker. These three serve as the main characters in Devil's Rejects and Three from Hell, and these movies follow them as they're on the run after the events of the first movie. The Entity. It Follows. Sometimes called It or The Curse, the entity in It Follows is mostly mysterious with no clear origin and a limited idea of its abilities. The basic concept of It Follows is that there's a curse, and anyone who has it will eventually be killed by this entity. We don't know how the curse started, but we know that the only way to remove the curse is through sexual intercourse. However, when the current holder is killed by the entity, it will then track the last cursed person, working its way back presumably to the original carrier. The entity can take the form of any human and oftentimes looks like a person familiar to the cursed, although it changes its form every time it's out of sight. Essentially, the entity slowly walks towards the victim, never running, but also never losing stamina and constantly approaching them. Brahms Hillshire, the boy. This is one of those big spoiler entries, so fair warning. Brahms is initially believed to be a porcelain doll that an elderly couple, the Hillshires, treat as their son, following the tragic death of their real son Brahms in a fire 20 years earlier. When Greta, an American nanny, is hired to care for the doll, she's given a strict set of bizarre rules. Soon, strange supernatural events begin happening, like the doll moving by itself. In a huge twist, it's revealed that the real Brahms is alive, having survived the fire and grown up. He's now hiding within the walls of the family mansion. Brahms, now a disturbed adult, manipulates the doll in the household. Turns out Brahms actually killed a young girl, and the fire was a cover-up for the murder, which is why his parents protect him by keeping him hidden. I love that the doll isn't controlled by a demon like Annabelle or possessed by a murderer like Chucky, but instead the doll is just a doll. But a creepy-ass dude is living in the walls. I guess because it seems like this could really happen. Esther Coleman, orphan. Esther is a seemingly innocent girl adopted by the Coleman family. After some strange occurrences revolving around Esther, like her breaking the leg of a classmate, it's revealed that Esther is not a child, but a 33-year-old woman suffering from a rare hormonal disorder called hypopituitarism, which stunts her physical growth and gives her the appearance of a child. She's a violent and cunning psychopath who has a history of infiltrating families, attempting to seduce the fathers, and killing anyone who stands in her way. It's worth noting that Esther was inspired by the real-life story of Barbara Skrylova, a 33-year-old woman who posed as a 13-year-old boy to avoid police after being involved in a weird child-abusing cult. More recently was the Natalie Grace incident, which was another similar case, although this actually happened after Orphan. Giant ants. Them. This one's pretty self-explanatory. The giant ants in Them are created as a result of atomic radiation from nuclear tests, which increases their size. They still maintain their hierarchical structure with a giant queen leading them. Bathsheba Sherman, The Conjuring. Bathsheba is the original antagonist of the first Conjuring film. She was a 19th century woman accused of witchcraft and child murder who allegedly sacrificed her infant to the devil and cursed her land before committing suicide. Her ghost haunts the Perron family's farmhouse on Rhode Island, exhibiting powers such as possession and manipulation of the physical environment. Bathsheba particularly targets mothers, attempting to force them to kill their own children. Her horrific influence leads the Perrin family to seek help from paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, who uncover her dark history and perform an exorcism to save the family. Dr. Caligari, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Dr. Caligari is a hypnotist who uses a sleepwalker named Cesar, or maybe Cesari, let me know in the comments, to commit murders in a small German town. He presents himself as a carnival showman, showcasing Cesar, who is kept in a state of perpetual sleep and obeys Caligari's command. The story follows Francis, a man investigating Dr. Caligari, to get to the bottom of the murders. However, in a twist ending, it turns out that Francis and Cesar are inmates in an insane asylum and that Dr. Caligari is actually just the director of the asylum. Ellie, let the right one in. Ellie is a centuries-old vampire who appears as a pale 12-year-old child living in a bleak suburb of Stockholm. Despite looking like a kid, Ellie possesses the strength, agility, and predatory instincts of a vampire. She forms a bond with Oscar, a lonely and bullied boy who lives in the same apartment complex. Ellie's survival depends on consuming human blood, and she relies on her caretaker to bring her humans to feast on. Ellie does show moments of vulnerability and compassion, particularly in her interactions with Oscar. Brenda Bates, urban legend. Another spoiler warning here, Brenda Bates is the mysterious killer in urban legend. She specifically kills her victims in a fashion that replicates various urban legends. This is all done as an act of revenge after the death of her fiancé, David Evans, who died in a car accident caused by the film's protagonist, Natalie Simon, and her friend Michelle. As a prank, the girls turned off their car's headlights and then chased the first vehicle that flashed its headlights at them, which happened to be David's car, eventually leading to a car accident. Because of the urban legend angle, Brenda uses creative methods to kill her victims, like forcing pop rocks and other chemicals down a guy's throat to emulate the myth of dying by eating pop rocks and soda, and my personal favorite, putting a student's dog in the microwave based on the old lady dries a dog in the microwave legend. 6 Demons, the exorcism of Emily Rose. This is referring to the 6 different demonic entities that possess Emily Rose. It's revealed during the attempted exorcism when Father Richard Moore demands the demons say his name, and instead he gets 6 names: Cain, Nero, Judas, Legion, Belial, and Lucifer. The film is actually based on the real-life exorcism of Anneliese Mitchell, and these 6 names are based on the supposed demons that possessed Anneliese. However, the real-life 6 included Hitler and Priest Fleischmann instead of Belial and Legion. The number can be debated here, as Cain, Nero, and Judas are all humans, not demons, but we can assume for the sake of the movie that they're referring to the demonic spirits that possibly possessed them. Also, Legion comes from the New Testament when Jesus casts demons out of a herd of pigs. When he asks their name, they say, "My name is Legion, for we are many." So honestly, who knows how many demons reside in Emily Rose. But this is moving from horror villain Iceberg to Sunday school real quick, so let's keep it moving. Norman Nordstrom. Don't breathe. Norman is a blind army vet who received $300,000 as compensation after his daughter was killed in a car accident. Some young delinquents learn about Norman's small fortune and the fact that he's blind and decide he's an easy target, plotting to rob him. Well, they were very, very wrong, as Norman is more cunning than they thought, shutting the lights off and using his enhanced hearing to track the intruders down and take them out. So far, he's not much of a villain, but instead kind of just a badass defending himself in a home invasion. But here comes the big twist. Spoilers ahead. It turns out that Norman, in an act of revenge, kidnapped the woman who killed his daughter in the car accident and kept her hostage in his basement. Worse than that, in a kind of sick eye for an eye mentality, he impregnated her using a turkey baster in order to replace his daughter. Yeah, man, this guy's a freak. Well, one of the would-be robbers manages to survive the attack after almost killing Norman in the escape. In Don't Breathe 2, Norman actually has some positive character development, becoming more of an anti-hero, and it looks like we're likely to get a 3rd movie at some point. Hill People, The Hills Have Eyes. The Hill People's origin varies between the original 1977 film and the 2006 remake, but the basic idea is the same in both. They're a family of deformed murdering cannibals who live in the desert and kidnap travelers to kill and eat. In the original film, the family patriarch, Papa Jupiter, was once an evil child who killed his sister. He eventually shacks up with an insane prostitute, and they have several deformed children. In the 2006 remake, the Hill People are the result of nuclear testing in the New Mexico desert. The family are the descendants of miners who refuse to leave, causing the children to be exposed to heavy radiation and to become deformed. When a family's passing through the area, they go on the attack. This is one of the rare instances, along with The Fly, where I actually prefer the remake to the original. I think the Hill People are much scarier and disturbing. The most stand out to me is Big Brain, a wheelchair-bound family member who has an enlarged sack-like head. The remake doesn't feature Papa Jupiter hardly at all, but there's actually some really cool concept art that suggests he was supposed to have a parasitic twin on his chest, but this got cut from the movie. Rawhead Rex. Rawhead Rex is a monstrous ancient pagan deity accidentally unleashed from his underground prison in rural Ireland. He has a grotesque humanoid appearance featuring sharp teeth, glowing red eyes, and a mane of wild hair. As Rawhead Rex rampages through the countryside, he leaves a trail of gruesome murders and destruction, targeting anyone in his path. The film is actually based on a Clive Barker novel, and there are some large differences between the two. For instance, Rawhead is described in the novel as essentially looking like a giant phallus and mainly sets out to have his way with women, while in the film he looks more like a mutant beast and is focused more on killing. Rawhead seems to have the ability to convince people to follow him, most notably a priest, and I have to say, while the novel is much more disturbing overall, in the film, Rawhead baptizes the priest by urinating on him. It's one of the weirdest and most uncomfortable moments I've seen in a while. Cujo. Cujo is everybody's favorite killer dog. After chasing a rabbit into a bat cave, Cujo is bitten by a bat and contracts rabies. He then kills anyone who goes near him. Not much more to say on this one, other than it's interesting to note that Stephen King, who wrote the original novel, said he doesn't even remember writing this book as it was one of the books he wrote while completely addicted to cocaine and alcohol. Demons. The Amityville Horror. The Amityville Horror is based on the supposed true events experienced by the Lutz family after they moved into a house in Amityville, New York. In the film, the family encounters several supernatural entities and phenomena that seem to be related to the fact that a man killed his entire family in the house 1 year prior. Eventually, the family finds out that the house was built on a Native American burial site and that a devil worshiper lived on the property at some point after. In the original film, the only embodied demon is that of Jody the pig, who first seems to be the imaginary friend of one of the children, but reveals itself as a demonic entity taking the shape of a red-eyed pig. Amityville 2, The Possession, is a prequel that focuses on the family who lived in the house before the Lutz. In this film, a demon possesses the family's teenage son, who then kills his family. We get a pretty good look at the actual demon during the exorcism of the son, and in Amityville Dollhouse, we see several demons, one appearing to be the devil himself, followed by his minions. William Weir, Event Horizon. Dr. William Weir was the lead designer of a spaceship called the Event Horizon that has the ability to travel faster than light and travel to distant parts of the universe. However, the ship vanished during its original voyage. Dr. Weir, along with a space crew, board a rescue vessel sent to investigate the Event Horizon once it mysteriously reappeared in orbit around Neptune. The crew is forced to board the Event Horizon after the rescue ship is damaged, and they find through a series of video logs that the previous crew had gone completely insane, fornicating and then mutilating each other in horrific ways. It appears that when the ship vanished, it was actually cast into another dimension that is essentially hell. From here, the ship itself begins to mess with the new crew, forcing them to hallucinate in response to their fears. Dr. Weir begins seeing his dead wife, who mysteriously took her own life while he was still building Event Horizon. Overwhelmed by the sight of his wife, the ship convinces Weir to assist in returning Event Horizon into the hell dimension once again. He does some horrific things along the way, and he also gets his eyes gouged out at one point, which is pretty disturbing. Later, the ship somehow restores his eyesight, but he takes a strange form with large symbolic cuts all over his body. The Toys, Demonic Toys. This one's pretty straightforward. These are just toys who are possessed by demonic spirits, each with its own characteristics. Jack Attack is a jack-in-the-box toy with razor-sharp teeth. Grizzly Teddy is a teddy bear that can transform into a large beast. Mr. Static is a robot soldier who can fire energy blasts. And Baby Oopsie Daisy is a killer baby doll that actually got a whole spin-off series. The toys are brought to life by a powerful demon known simply as the Kid, who takes the form of a young boy and is trying to be reborn into the physical world. Roy Burns. Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning. This is probably one of the strangest twists in the Friday the 13th franchise that requires a little bit of explanation before we get to Roy Burns. In the previous film, The Final Chapter, Jason is killed by a young Tommy Jarvis, and this film takes place a few years later following a teenage Tommy who's now haunted by the traumatic events he suffered through. He's transferred to a halfway house with a group of other teens. However, shortly after arriving, one of the teens, Joey, is killed by another enraged teen, Vic, who's shortly after arrested. Strangely enough, a series of murders begins, and Tommy can't help but shake the fact that Jason is somehow back and hunting him down. And this is all but proven when a figure wearing the iconic mask finally reveals himself. Tommy gets the better of him though, and it is then revealed that this is not Jason, but Roy Burns, the father of Joey, the kid who got killed earlier. Basically, his son's death drove him mad, and he began going on a killing spree inspired by the Camp Crystal Lake killings. It's kind of a bizarre turn of events, and this makes it the second and last last Friday the 13th movie to not feature Jason as the main antagonist. Reverend Henry Kane, Poltergeist 2. Henry Kane is the main antagonist in the Poltergeist movies, mostly the second and third movie, as we don't actually see his physical form in the first movie. He was once a charismatic and fanatical preacher who led a doomsday cult in the early 19th century. Believing that the end of the world was imminent, he convinced his followers to retreat with him to an underground cavern. When his apocalyptic predictions didn't come true, Kane refused to let anyone leave, resulting in the death of his entire congregation, including himself. This act of mass murder left his spirit cursed and bound to the earthly plane. In Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, Kane's spirit relentlessly pursues the Freeling family, particularly targeting the young daughter, Carol Ann, who has a unique sensitivity to the supernatural. Kane's goal is to capture Carol Ann and use her life force to gain power and escape his spectral imprisonment. Lester Lowe, Silver Bullet. Reverend Lowe is a seemingly respectable minister in the small town of Tarker's Mill. However, unbeknownst to his congregation, he is actually a werewolf responsible for a series of brutal murders plaguing the town. It's unknown how long Lowe has been a werewolf and how he became one. It's clear though that he doesn't actually see his ailment as a curse, but instead a blessing, using his transformation to kill those he deems immoral. However, he himself kills innocent people when they get close to discovering his secret. Connell Cochran, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Halloween 3 is the black sheep of the Halloween franchise. Originally, John Carpenter intended each movie to have a different setting and story, but since the first two movies featured Michael Myers, people were confused and pissed off that the third movie had nothing to do with everyone's favorite new killer. In retrospect, most fans of the series actually credit Halloween 3 as being great in its own right. Halloween 3's villain is Connell Cochran. Cochran is the wealthy and charismatic owner of Silver Shamrock Novelties, a company producing popular Halloween masks. Secretly, Cochran is a modern-day warlock with an evil agenda. He plans to use the masks embedded with microchips containing fragments of a stolen Stonehenge rock to execute a mass sacrifice on Halloween night. When the Silver Shamrock commercial jingle plays, the masks will activate, causing horrific deaths that align with ancient Celtic rituals. Pretty dark in concept and an interesting idea. Chad, Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. This is a great movie and one of the few comedies on the list. It follows Tucker and Dale, two well-meaning hillbillies who are looking forward to a relaxing vacation at their dilapidated mountain cabin, which they plan to fix up. At the same time, a group of college students is camping in the same area. Through a series of unfortunate misunderstandings, the students come to believe that Tucker and Dale are murderous backwoods killers, leading to a series of tragic and comedic deaths. Chad is one of these teens and has a dark history as his parents were killed by hillbillies when he was young, leaving him with a deep-seated resentment and prejudice towards folks like Tucker and Dale. His fear is the root of all the deaths in the film, including his friends. When Tucker and Dale save one of the girls, Allison, from drowning, Chad believes that they actually kidnapped her and decides he must kill them.
We got your friend! Oh God! They got Allison! That's your friend! Why the hell are they running away? Hey!
He becomes more deranged as the movie moves forward, and by the end he goes full villain. Even after learning this was all a misunderstanding, he tries to kill the pair and even Allison, cutting off Tucker's fingers in the process. The Engineers, Prometheus. We already touched on the Engineers as part of the Xenomorphs entry, so I'll make this brief, but the Engineers are revealed to be the creators of humanity, having seeded Earth with their own DNA millions of years ago. Their motivations remain largely mysterious, but they possess an advanced knowledge of genetic engineering. This is most notable in the creation of the Xenomorphs, which are used as a bioweapon designed to eradicate other species. Deacon Frost, Blade. Deacon Frost is a vampire who seeks to overthrow the traditional vampire hierarchy and establish a new order where turned vampires like himself are supreme. Disdained by the pureblood vampires who have made treaties with the human government, Frost aims to awaken La Magra, the blood god, to gain godlike powers and make vampires the dominant species. Frank / the Mother, Barbarian. Big spoilers here, and this one is pretty recent, so fair warning. The Iceberg chart only lists the Mother on here, but I'll throw Frank in since he's tied into it. The Mother is the main threat in Barbarian. Her father, Frank, was a serial killer and rapist who would then keep the resulting children of his victims, and when they were old enough, do the same to them. He also videotapes these assaults so he can watch it back later. The Mother is the product of several generations of this, leading to her deformed appearance, lack of speech skills, and batshit behavior. She's also completely naked at all times, which isn't very fun to look at. She lives in underground tunnels built under Frank's house where he kept his victims. The Mother takes in any person she can find and forces them to act as her children, since this is the whole purpose of her existence. Part of her motherly yearnings are also due to the fact that the only source of entertainment she has in the tunnels is a VHS instructional tape on breastfeeding. She's highly protective over her would-be children, but ultimately ends up killing them herself when they act out. She can do this easily as she has almost supernatural strength and resilience. There you have it, that's tier 3. Next week we'll get into tier 4, which is just as jam-packed as this one, so stay tuned for that. Also, I just want to say sorry for the recent delay in uploads. My schedule gets pretty clogged up in the summer and I have much less time to work on videos, but I'm really burning the candle at both ends trying to get good content out for you guys, so thanks for hanging in there. I want to thank my friends on Patreon, Naomi Romero, Soma, Krusty the Crab, One Group, Laz Wishgender, Glimmering Haster, Hunter Piva, Heather M, Creepypasta Cube, A Slightly Bigger Ant, Ricky Shadow, Chase Middleton, Strong Kohi, Matt Rozak, Glenn Bridges, Steamboat Millie, The Beast Llama, and Holy Ears. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you want a shout out like that, as well as bonus content, consider becoming a patron. The link is below. But I appreciate you guys watching at all, so thank you. This is Grief speaking. Goodbye, friends.